before you start this job, you want to keep in mind that after you're done, you're going to need to go to a local garage and have the vehicle aligned to avoid premature tire wear. I'm going to remove the wheel, use a 19mm socket. Take the wheel off. I'm going to remove these two shock bolts, the two lower shock bolts, this one and the one on the back side as well. Just use a 13mm socket. Now I'm going to loosen up this lower nut on the lower sway bar link. I'm going to use a 15mm wrench. And to hold the stud from spinning, I'm going to use a 5mm hex bit or hex socket. I can switch to a gear wrench. And take the nut off. You can slide the link out. We want to remove that lower ball joint nut. You can use a 21mm wrench or a 13/16 wrench. Loosen it up. And I'll switch to a 21mm socket. All right, pull that nut off. Now I'm going to use a pickle fork to separate the lower ball joint from the knuckle. There is other tools you could have that go around the knuckle and push down on the ball joint. This will work fine. Line it up. There we go. Just slide this lower ball joint up and push the knuckle away. Disconnect this wheel speed sensor wire right here. Remove it from the sway bar link. And then we're going to turn the steering wheel all the way to the left because we're not going to be able to get this bolt out because it's not going to clear the steering boot. Take an 18mm wrench, put it on the bolt right here. Take a 21mm socket, take this nut off. Take that out. And then the front bolt, use an 18mm socket and a 21mm wrench on the nut. Loosen this up. Once that's loose, I'll use my ratchet. Just make sure your head's not near the control arm. It may drop a little bit. The wheel speed wire is connected to the lower control arm, and there's some retainers. What you can do is from underneath, take a little punch, a hammer, just tap it through. It's a little bit easier to do it that way. Same with that one. Or you could use a trim tool, take it off that way. And there's one more retainer over here. Makes it real easy. Just move that wire out of the way. Now we're going to take this control arm bolt out. Just give it a tap. And try to get it out the rest of the way. There we go. And this back one, I'll just use a punch. Tap it out. And once it gets close to the steering rack and the tie rod, you're just going to have to push the whole knuckle towards the front of the vehicle. You should be able to get it out. It is a little bit tight there, but it does come out. Grab the control arm and just slide it out. All right, take the control arm, slide it in position. You can use a dead blow hammer or a rubber mallet to get it lined up. I can get this back bolt started. All right, I got that back one started. I'm gonna get the front one lined up. Got that bolt in. sure the back bolts lined up. Now the bolts are in on the lower control arm bushings. I'm not going to put the nuts on and tighten those down yet. I'm going to do that last. I want to hook up all the other stuff. All right, before we attach the shock, we definitely need to send this wire through the lower control arm in the right position because it goes under the shock. So attach the wire with these retainers. Just push them down, back in place. Right there and right there, and then there's one underneath where the shock goes. And let's attach the connector to the wheel speed sensor right there. And then attach this piece to the sway bar link. All right, now we're gonna attach the ball joint. Just raise up on the knuckle, get it to line up. Just gonna support underneath the lower control arm and take the nut, get the nut started on top. I'm just gonna raise up on this control arm a little bit with the screw jack. Just tighten this nut down as far as it goes, and then I can use a 21mm wrench. If you have a ratchet wrench, it would be ideal. Once the stud starts spinning, I'm gonna hold it with a 10mm wrench. Sometimes if you have enough pressure underneath the control arm, you don't need to use the 10mm wrench. The stud won't spin. Right, now we're gonna use a 21mm socket, and we're gonna torque this nut to 30 foot-pounds. And then you have to also tighten it an additional 120 degrees. If you have an angle meter, you can do that. If not, do the best you can. Sometimes it's a good idea to just put a mark on a socket and then tighten it to where you think 120 degrees would be. Now we'll get the sway bar link lined up. Take the nut, install the nut. And we'll tighten this down. Then I'm going to torque that to 37 foot-pounds. Right, now I'm going to get the lower shock bolts lined up. Start on this side, get this one started, and line up the front bolt. If you have to twist this a little bit, you can put some pliers on both ends and try to twist it so the bolt holes line up a little better. And I'll tighten these up. Now I'm going to torque these bolts to 18 foot-pounds. When we go to install the nut on the lower control arm bushings, the bracket for the frame is actually slotted. So you want to get this as close as possible to where it was before. You are going to need to go have an alignment done afterwards anyway, so they may change this. But if you get it close, then it won't be as hard for them to adjust it. So get that on, and then I'll do the same on the back. What I'm going to do is raise up the lower control arm. You want this as close to ride height as possible, or ride level as possible. What they want you to do is put the tire on, set this on the ground, and then torque those bolts and nuts. But that's very hard to do. It's hard to get in there with a torque wrench while this is on the ground. So to do as best as I can, I'm just going to use a screw jack or pole jack and get this close and tighten it down. And we're going to torque this to 100 foot-pounds. And same with the front one. There we go. Now lower the pole jack. Put the wheel back on. And the lug nuts. Now I'm going to torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds, and I'm going to torque them in a star pattern so that it tightens the wheel down evenly. And we'll just go around again, double check.